This is the story of how a small union of gunsmiths grew to become one of Britain's most important industrial groups. To begin at the very beginning, however, it's necessary to go back much further than a century, to the year 1689, at the court of William and Mary. King William III, worried by threats of invasion, sharply criticised the practice of obtaining military weapons from Holland. He was overheard by Sir Richard Newdigate, an MP for Warwickshire, who immediately spoke up on behalf of his Birmingham constituents, among whom were many fine gunsmiths. The result was a trial order for 5 of the leading Birmingham smiths. It was satisfactorily carried out, and a firm contract was made between the government and the quintet for the supply of 200 muskets a month, at 17 shillings per pence ready money. This practice of trading with the gunmakers as a group continued for 150 years. At the time of the Crimean War, 14 of the master smiths formalised their position, joining together as the Birmingham Small Arms Trade Association. It was this body which on June 7, 1861, took the decision to form a public company, the Birmingham Small Arms Company Limited. As an emblem of their craft, they adopted the sign of 3 crossed rifles, which has since become world known as the Piled Arms trademark. The object of forming a company was to begin making small arms by machinery to meet the growing competition from the mechanised government factory at Enfield. A 25-acre site was bought at Small Heath, at that time just outside the Birmingham boundary, and 2 years later the factory was in operation. By 1866, the company could record a profit of £7,000, and in a few short years, aided by the turbulent international politics of the time, it became the largest private arms manufacturer in Europe.
The very first rifle I ever bought with my own money was after working all summer on the farm. I bought a new BSA air sporter, and it so excited me that I couldn't sleep for about 3 days. The entire industry looks on BSA with great affection. It's more than a club, it's more than somebody that you buy from. It's actually something you associate a great part of your youth with, and you grew up alongside as the BSA products grew up and evolved.
One order from the Prussian government, then at war with Austria, was not for rifles, but for cartridge cases, 40 million of them. Rather than turn it down, the directors then acquired a munitions factory. The early prosperity was short-lived. As wars ceased, the demand for weapons fell, and the private arms trade was the first to suffer. Towards the end of the 1870s, the factory was completely closed for 12 months, and the future looked impossibly dark. A small contract enabled the works to be opened again, however, and in 1880, fate took a hand in the shape of an inventor, a Mr. E.C.F. Otto, who had designed a strange type of bicycle with 2 large wheels on either side of the rider. He demonstrated it by riding on the boardroom table under the noses of the astonished directors, and so impressed them that they put the device into production immediately. The first venture into the transport field was followed by more conventional bicycles and tricycles, but a sudden increase in the demand for rifles at the end of the 1880s caused the directors to drop the cycle work. During the Boer War, the company supplied many thousands of rifles to the British forces. In the First World War, the BSA factories were turned over almost entirely to munitions work. Huge quantities of service rifles, machine guns, military motorcycles, and the world's first folding bicycles were supplied to the troops. Right through the 30s, BSA rifle production had been confined to comparatively small quantities of sporting weapons. Apart from the company's own factories in Birmingham, Coventry, Redditch, Sheffield and County Durham, many dispersal units and shadow factories were used for the purpose of arms production. The Small Heath administration alone, BSA Cycles Limited and BSA Guns Limited, controlled 67 factories, employing 28,000 people and containing 25,000 machine tools. This organisation produced more than half the small arms supplied to Britain's forces during the war. BSA's war production included nearly 500,000 of the Browning machine guns, with which RAF Spitfires and Hurricanes won the Battle of Britain. 1.25 million service rifles, 400,000 Sten guns, machine guns, cannon, anti-tank rifles and gun carriages, 10 million shell fuses, over 3.5 million magazines, and 750,000 anti-aircraft rockets. Several group factories were heavily bombed, and at Smallheath more than 50 employees lost their lives. At this works alone, more machine tools were destroyed or damaged by enemy action than were lost in the whole of the Coventry Blitz.
I started at BSA in 1952. I started at 15 and became a probationary apprentice. Then, of course, continued the apprenticeship for 6 years. Done 2 years army service, and then came back to the BSA, where miraculously I was made a foreman. So I've seen a lot of changes in BSA, right from when I started work at Shirley, the factory in Shirley, which was a shadow factory, number 85 factory, which was produced during the war.
Since the end of the war, the company has turned its expertise to more recreational pursuits, including motorcycles until the 1970s. And although the company no longer makes military weapons, BSA Guns designs, manufactures and maintains a steady flow of air rifles for distribution all over the world.
These days, it's fair to say, BSA are regarded as right up there with the leaders as far as the technical advancement goes. They've embraced synthetic stocks, full-length barrel silencers. No one is surprised now when BSA does something sort of fairly radical with styling or product development. It's not the grand old lady, it's a leading light in the airgun industry, and rightly so for the amount of development that's gone into them.
From the world-renowned Meteor to the very latest precision-manufactured pre-charged pneumatic rifles, BSA Guns sets the standard that others follow.